Because I think when you can view life from an objective perspective, not through the lens of emotion, not through the lens of subjectivity, but just, stripping all of that away and looking at it for what it is, it really gives you a lot of power in the decisions and the choices that you make. The thing with a projector is our superpower is we can see things that other people can't see, but we really struggle to see things within ourselves. We're so obsessed with our thoughts. We're literally so attached to our thoughts and living in the state of mind that we completely forget that in every moment of every single day, there is complete, unfiltered and unconditional bliss and euphoria that we have access to. And all we need to do is allow ourselves to go to that place. It's crazy.
All right, welcome back to Before the Money, everybody. I am really pumped for this one. We are about to deliver some value, but before we do that, please locate the subscribe button on whatever platform you're listening to this on and follow along, because this show only grows with the help of you guys. I can do everything in my power to bring you insane guests. We can talk about every topic under the sun, but if you don't reciprocate by helping us spread the message, then we're just here having fun, which is fine. I'm happy to do that. But I want to see this message spread to as many people as possible. So in today's episode, I am joined by a beautiful and talented guest. I'm going to give you a run sheet right now. So she's born and bred in England. She's an ex-professional dancer and actor. So she's been in the business. She's seen some things, and I'm sure we're going to get into it today. She is the founder of the Uncaged Consulting Group, which is a leadership and team culture development company. And this is quite a new venture. So I'm sure we're going to get into why she's rebranded, why she's kind of made the very scary leap to change the trajectory of her life. She is the host of the Life Uncaged podcast, and she is the facilitator of the In Her Wild Women's Retreat, which is a place for female leaders to fully step into their power. All that is well and good, but the reason why she is here today is because this woman just oozes confidence, but in a really humble way. And above that, she has such a beautiful and soothing voice. So if you're not listening on high quality headphones, plug them in, because this is some ASMR shit right now. So Emma Zia, how are you doing? Welcome to the podcast.
What an introduction. I love that. Thank you. Thank you for having me here. I'm so excited.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Now, we came into each other's lives through some networking events, through the She Knows business with Coco. And there's just something about like your aura in the room. You're a very good listener. So I figured let's sit down. You're in the hot seat right now, and let's see where we go from here.
I love that. Let's see what comes through.
Yeah, awesome. So I want to start right in the depths, because one thing I didn't mention in that introduction is actually you're quite in tune on a spiritual level. And I know in this podcast, we like to dabble all things spirituality as well as business. And I think energetically it all pairs together. How do I phrase this? In terms of being spiritually in tune or energetically in tune, how have you like to describe that? What is that like for you? How does it show up in your world? And how do you utilize that to kind of chart your course in business and in life?
Really interesting question. I think it has to be a cornerstone of business. I don't know how people do business without, consciousness and the spiritual work and shadow work. So for me, this is something that I've actually explored with my own understanding of this, because I think a lot of people are spiritual but not conscious, and some people are conscious but not spiritual. And I think they're often put in the same boat.
What is the difference then, before you get stuck in?
So spirituality is typically associated with traditions or certain, traditional bodies of work like Tantra or Buddhism or, things like that. It can also be, this is how I see it, so this is just my perspective, that, spirituality can be spirit guides and angels and tarot cards and things like that. Whereas consciousness, or the practice of consciousness, is really awareness. That's all it is. And that's more of the spirituality, quote unquote, that I subscribe to. So I've done the whole spirit guides, angels, that kind of thing. And I think one thing with me is I love to dabble in all of these different traditions. Like I've done Tantra as well and all these different things to kind of add different flavors to my own toolbox and to really enrich who I am as a practitioner. But I always just bring it back to consciousness. So just continually every moment of every day, developing such strong self-awareness that I can see either my experience or other people's experiences or just life in general from a very objective perspective. Because I think when you can view life from an objective perspective, not through the lens of emotion, not through the lens of subjectivity, but just, stripping all of that away and looking at it for what it is, it really gives you a lot of power in the decisions and the choices that you make. So that's kind of how I practice it. I was born into a very spiritual family. So my dad is a spiritual healer. My granddad is a spiritual healer. My mum is psychic. So it was kind of a no-brainer that, for as long as I can remember, I was having precognition, like I was seeing things before they made manifest. Ever since I can remember, I was very, very sensitive to people's energies. So I would just walk into a room and I would just pick up on, what's going on behind closed doors for everyone. And, naturally, like when you're so young, your ego isn't fully developed. So I honestly didn't know sometimes what was reality and what was just the visualization that I was having, because I was really playing in two different realms. I had one foot in the physical realm, one foot in the metaphysical realm. And that came with a lot of challenges because I didn't really know how to channel it. I didn't know how to, utilize it. And I felt very overwhelmed, to be honest with you. My nervous system was just always activated because I'm always picking up on all of these different things. And so this actually developed as really bad, severe social anxiety. So all that, like you say, this is what blows my mind is everyone always says how confident I am and how my presence really, like when I walk into a room, it's felt and it's experienced. But all the way through high school, I was that kid that couldn't speak. I was that kid that would sit there and I felt so afraid to speak up, to say anything. And I would just sit there like kind of chewing on my jumper and kind of crossing my legs, my body language. I was just a completely different person. So the Emma you see today is a complete 180 from who I used to be. And we'll probably go into that and some of the key moments that really got me here. But yeah, so because of that kind of social anxiety, that's when I started working with a psychic who taught me how to open and close my channel and how to not be so sensitive, which is interesting because I'm actually struggling with that again at the moment with all of the shifts that I'm going through personally and, collectively. But yeah, and then eventually I ended up kind of doing it using that skill. This is what's crazy is so many of us have, this is the one thing I find, this is a bit of a tangent, but I know that you love that kind of vibe, that what comes most natural to us is actually what we're here to capitalize on as part of our soul's purpose or human's purpose, however you want to say it. And that was one thing with the psychic ability is it's always been there and it's the thing that comes most natural to me, but it was the thing that I couldn't see how I could capitalize on that to help others and also, to make money from it. And so that's been a whole journey in itself. And then, even now with the consulting, that's a really big cornerstone of everything that I do is using the fact that I can tap into that metaphysical realm and see things that other people can't see to bring awareness and clarity and direction very quickly because I really appreciate speed and efficiency. So to really help people get into alignment quickly, I can use that now. So yeah.
Yo, so I just checked our statistics, right? It's not something I do very often, but I was blown away. Our subscriber base has exploded over the last few months. So I want to thank all of you who have clicked that subscribe button. You show up to the episodes every single week. You support, you participate, and you take action for yourself. And for all of you who haven't subscribed yet, you want to be part of the club, go ahead and locate that button on whatever platform you're listening to this on. The subscribe button is usually pretty bright. If you want to be notified every time we drop a valuable episode, and while you're on a roll, why don't you go ahead and leave behind a 5-star rating? Let us know we're producing value because we're going to continue showing up and doing our thing every single week, bringing on high value guests and sharing unordinary stories of how they got there. So if you're an action taker and you don't want to miss out on an opportunity to gain valuable knowledge that's going to propel you toward your success, go ahead and click that subscribe button and let's get stuck back into this episode. And yeah, there's lots of things, and like going back to what you said about the things that you find most easy, that being your calling. We don't always find that in the clearest places. Like, for instance, I can relate to everything you just said, especially about like your confidence and things like that, because when I left school, I went hermit mode. I fully focused on building business and isolated myself from everyone around me. And I started telling myself this story that, I'm like socially anxious, or, I'm an introvert, all these kinds of things. Like, I used to get so nervous going to social situations. But what I did to counteract that was I learned how to listen. And that ability to listen intently in order to not just listen to respond, but listen to understand. That's what has led me to be able to do this podcast at the level in which I do it now. And like that period of time was very, very painful. But now I feel like that has made me find my calling. And like this podcast has been so effortless. It's a lot of fucking work, but it's been so effortless because of the experience of it. And like all the things that happen to us throughout our lifetime are difficult in the moment if they're worth pursuing. But going back to where you were talking about towards the end of that rant, and I'm trying to remember where we were.
Back in, yeah.
I'm trying to remember where we were before the camera died. Yes, you were talking about using your abilities, your innate kind of conscious abilities to operate with clients and things like that. Do you find that we all have that ability to a certain degree, but it's just kind of pushed out of us? Like, do you find that yours was somewhat nurtured in your environment?
Yeah, I just had to jump in then because I loved how you said pushed out.
Yeah.
Because 1000% I believe that we are all psychic beings.
Yep.
Like we all have telepathy, telekinesis. We all have all of those, precognition. We all have all of those skills. And I say skills because it is something that can be developed and learned. But I do think, this is my perspective, that some of us are born into this world with the veil already lifted. Yep. And I feel like that's because of previous lifetimes where we've gone through this style of development. So I believe that I'm quite an old soul. And a lot of other people I know that have strong psychic abilities without learning it, and it just comes naturally like as children, is the fact that they also have lived many alternate lives here. So there's kind of this, are you familiar with individuation in psychology? So Carl Jung coined the term individuation in psychology, and that basically means like that's the point in someone's life where we start to go off on our own and realize that we are separate from our parents, we are separate from the consensus, and we actually start to individuate ourselves and figure out who we are. And this can really come out in some midlife crises. This is this can come out in so many different ways. Spiritual awakenings, things like that. And my perspective is that people that already have that strong psychic ability have already been through the individuation process in alternate lives. So we come here already feeling separate from the consensus, and we can already see things that other people can't see. And I think as much as that can be very painful to feel like an outsider and an observer, it is also a superpower because, we're not, if we were born to fit into society, then society would never evolve. So some of us, it takes us to be socially anxious, to be the ones just listening, to be the ones simply observing, so that we can actually pinpoint, okay, where is the points and the access points or the windows of opportunity here for society to evolve at large. Did I answer your question?
Who cares?
I go off on tangents.
Yeah, no, I get that. And like you look at the major artists of the last few centuries, like Da Vinci and things like that, they were whack jobs. Yeah. But because they were able to sit just outside the realm of society, they were able to articulate and commentate what was really going on in an artistic way that people didn't really start to understand until many years later. And they were really the ones that shaped our society in the way they are today. Like think about the printing press, for instance, how that was invented. That was such an out of the box thinking. There was so many political figures pushing that invention into the ground because their entire paradigm was built around if books become easy to produce, then lots of people can get their hands on them and we will lose the creative control. You know, there's always the society that's pushing the people that are trying to move us into the next stage of development. And this is a very, very relevant topic right now, you know?
And I have to just like elaborate on something you said about, I love the way that you like elicit things. When you said, you know, these artists, they weren't really admired for their work until years and years after their existence. And that is one thing that I think our generation is missing the point of because we're so obsessed with it being about us.
Yeah, an immediate gratification.
Yeah. We're so obsessed with Emma getting the recognition, you know, or Jack getting the recognition. And it's like, but if we're actually here to be vessels and conduits of consciousness, however that is designed to be expressed and birthed through us, it's not about us. We're just simply the vessel for it. So like when people talk about leaving a legacy, often people talk about legacy as if it's their name that they want printed on the legacy. And it's like, well, why don't you actually take a step back? Why don't you let your ego take the back seat? And you're like, I want to leave a legacy where my body of work inspires people and changes the collective. And there's this ripple effect throughout humanity because of the consciousness being birthed through me, but it's not about me. So even when I'm gone, they don't even have to know that it comes from me. It's just my books or my content or, you know, my words or something is felt for people that, you know, they don't have to know it comes from me. And I think that's something that's really getting lost in our generation because we're so obsessed with stamping our name on everything and it's really being driven from the ego. And I think that's why people are really tripping themselves up in business, because if you're leading in your business from ego, that's when you're also leading from the fears, doubts and insecurities. And so it's going to be clouding all of that goodness that wants to come through you, the ideas, the inspiration and everything like that. It's going to be clouding that and blocking that from coming through fully because you're allowing your ego to interject and to actually get in the way of it all.
Yeah, especially in entrepreneurship as well. This is like a battle that I've come up against, and it took me getting conscious with my motivations for doing certain things to actually understand that there has to be a dance between your ego and things like that driving you to do something to get a result for you for whatever reason that is. And then also you need to understand that not to be tied to that result. That's the thing that I've been dealing with is like, I noticed when money's coming into my account, I'm in the best mood. I am so nice. I'm so giving. And then when there is changes to that cash flow, I go into selfish mode and start to like
survival.
Survival mode 100%. And that's one thing that I've had to really become conscious of, because when I step into that dark place, you know, I start pushing the people around me away and I start, you know, being super selfish and
self-centered.
It doesn't make for a fulfilling existence. On one, I feel like culture that really understands this concept of long form thinking and long form planning is Japanese, specifically in
That's a new word. Let's roll with it.
You heard it here first. Specifically in their business practices. You know, it's like standard here to make a 5-10 year business plan. Over there, it's common practice to make a 90-year business plan. So they don't care about, oh, I'm the CEO right now and I'm going to do this for the company. It's like, how can we position the company so that in a generation's time, we are still at the top? And that's one thing that we don't necessarily do over here in Western culture. But you can see like companies like Toshiba, Sony, things like that have been at the top of the game for so many years and continue to innovate because they're zoomed out, looking at life, multiple generations. Same with like the artists and things like that, like Da Vinci. But at the same time, all of these people that are able to zoom out, dissociate from the ego and build a legacy usually have very powerful mentorship that help them do that. And I really only started to do it when I got mentorship, when I got someone looking over my shoulder going, hey, yeah, it's all well and good you're doing that, but what about this? Or how's it going to affect this 10 steps down the line? What is your approach to mentorship? How's it affected your life? Have you gone there yet? Let's pivot to that direction, because I know it's something that a lot of our younger audience, I really want you guys to understand this while you are still young, because it's cheat code.
1000% it's a cheat code. Like, it's actually mind-blowing. Like, I grew up as a very independent person, and I think I really struggled to let support in for so many years, and that was a real block in my feminine. I was very much more in my masculine, and I was like, not that the masculine is typically, I'm going to do everything by myself, but the feminine energy is a little bit more of that receivership energy and, like letting in, and that comes into all areas of our lives: money, love, compliments, support, everything. And I was really blocked in that way. And when I went through a really bad bout of depression, maybe like 3 or 4 years ago, that's when I really broke, and I allowed people to see me in that brokenness because I had no other choice but to surrender to it. And it was one of the most game-changing things for me. And I've worked with coaches and healers pretty much all of my life because of the field that my dad is in and my granddad. I've always been around, my dad works from home and runs his business from home, so we've constantly got clients coming in and out. And so I'm very used to that dynamic of going to see an alternative therapist when there's something going on. So I've always done that. And then when I, went through this depression, that was really, it was like a different level of support. It wasn't like, oh, I'm having some trouble with something, like, can I ask you your advice? It was, can you hold space to see me in my brokenness just for a moment? And so that really lifted the good girl mask off. That lifted the people pleaser. That lifted, all the parts of me that felt shame for who I was and the parts of me that I didn't want people to see that I'd hidden for so long. It was this massive cracking open of I'm ready for you to see me, even though it makes me feel so uncomfortable. And in that process, that has actually been one of the most game-changing things to why I am the way I am now. So I'm a massive, massive supporter of letting mentorship in and coaching in. I think I talk about self-leadership a lot in the field that I'm in, and that is just a cornerstone of self-leadership, is being able to let people in, know when to call in support, let that person in, and not from a place of I don't know how to do this and I'm in my victim and I need someone to save me. It's from a place of I know that there's more I can elevate into. I know there's more I can stretch myself into. And in order for me to expand in that way, I'm going to invite someone in to point out my blind spots. And so it takes a lot of humility to let a mentor into your life, right? Because you will be humbled because they'll point something out to you and you're like, oh, I didn't see that. That was so unconscious. It's an extremely confrontational relationship dynamic, a mentor and a mentee, and it will be one of the most powerful and important things you can ever do in your life to elevate. And as you said, it's definitely that fast tracking process, right? If someone's already done it and been there, utilize that knowledge and that wisdom so that you can surpass them. I always say, so for the last year, I've predominantly been working with female business owners as an energy psychologist, because you could say by trade, I'm an energy psychologist. And so I said to them, I want you to surpass me. So I want to give you all the wisdom and knowledge and hold such a safe space for you that you can anchor into, so you can stretch yourself and you can do all these incredible things that you wouldn't feel that you could do without the safety of my support. And I think that's the beautiful thing about mentorship. It's not I'm going to keep you where you are and just give you the knowledge and you pay me. It's no, I want to feed you everything I've experienced and my wisdom so you can surpass me. And that in itself is human evolution.
Exactly. And that's the hardest part about it when you said humility. The thing is, people are observing us and making up opinions and stuff in their head, but oftentimes we don't hear those opinions because we haven't given them permission. Even doing little things like asking honest feedback from people that are in your life, like close relatives and things like that. I did an exercise the start of this year where I had to reach out to 10 of the closest people in my life and do a questionnaire. It was things like, what am I not seeing in my life? What are some opportunities I'm not taking? What are some habits that are holding me back? What's one thing you've never said to me? All those kinds of things that are very hard to have the conversation. And I got some incredible feedback because most of it was things that I didn't see my strengths in. And that's one thing, when you're struggling to see your abilities in a certain area and then 10 people that are very close observers of yours see how capable you are in that particular field, all of a sudden your own limiting beliefs take a step to the side because if they can see it, how come I can't see it?
I'm so happy you brought this up. This is actually something I'm working through at the moment. And so this is like a really, really good conversation to step into, because are you familiar with human design?
I am getting familiar with it. Yes.
Yeah. So for those of you listening, human design is essentially like an energetic intelligence blueprint. I don't know the exact kind of bodies of work that it's a combination of, but I know astrology is part of it. So it kind of, you put in some details similar to your astrology chart, and then it prints out, your profile. And that was like really game changing for me when I found out that I was a projector, because projectors operate very differently to, say, manifesting generators.
That's me.
Yeah. And Manigens make up such a large part of the population. Yeah. And then there's, projectors and reflectors, which aren't, it's more of a minority. And so it gave me so much understanding that I don't operate like most people I know, and that is okay. It was this massive like permission piece. And that's actually a big part of what I'm doing in consulting. I've got a human design expert to actually work with leaders and teams to make sure that everyone's in the right roles and doing the right. It's honestly phenomenal work. And the thing with a projector is our superpower is we can see things that other people can't see, but we really struggle to see things within ourselves. Okay. And it is mind-blowing to me. So where I'm living at the moment, I'm like really, really, really close, like best friends with the guy that I live with. And our dynamic has been so game-changing for me, because he has always seen the value and the worth in me and what I do. And he's always pointing out, you're so amazing at this, you're so amazing at this. And I'm like, really? Yeah. And it's made me realize how I've lived my life understanding myself and my strengths through other people telling me. And so what I've really been working on in the last few months is recognizing that in myself first. And it's been it feels so unnatural for me to see my greatness first. And that's something like I'm doing a lot of mirror work at the moment, spending a lot of time like looking at myself in the mirror. And every time I do that, I go back to my childhood and I see the childhood Emma and how, happy and bubbly she was and how outgoing she was and all of this stuff before the high school stuff kicked in, before the social anxiety. And it really just keeps bringing me back to how I've been divinely orchestrated to, be the transmitter of consciousness in the way that I have, and those strengths that I've been gifted with in order to make that happen. And I think it is so fascinating that we can't see our own greatness. And again, it kind of ties back full circle moment to the beginning of this episode, where I said that it's our most natural gifts and talents, which is what we're here to capitalize on. But because they're so natural for us, we can't see them. Like, it's like we're always trying to look for our purpose or our gifts and our talents in something else. We're always looking in other to find that out. And it is really this very uncomfortable process of sitting there and actually acknowledging, wow, I'm really fucking good at this. And this comes natural to me. How can I use this? And yeah, so it's a really difficult but amazing process.
And I feel like as well, it's very hard for us to realize our own gifts, because we're meant to be humble, don't stand up too high from the crowd, don't big note yourself, all that kind of stuff. And I feel like that's beaten into us the same way that, we're stripped of our beliefs of, having psychic abilities and our innate intuition and things like that. But how do you think having that experience of, going through the social anxiety and going through all the periods of your life where you didn't feel worthy, how do you feel like that enhanced your skill set to go on and be the person that you are now?
I think I'm not sure if this answers it directly, but this is the first thing that came through, is one thing that I really love about the fact that I outcasted myself at school was the fact that I didn't get involved in stuff which didn't feel good for me. Okay. Like, I was the one, you could say, I was in like the popular group, and I do that because I don't know, it's
inverted
school
commas,
politics. Yeah. I forgot we're doing a recording. And so I was in the popular group, but I was really, I didn't get involved in any of the drama. I didn't get involved in the bitching. It did not make sense to me. Like, when girls were going behind each other's backs, I was like, talk face to face. Like, what the fuck are you doing? So none of that really made sense to me, because I think integrity is such a big part of who I am, and it's always been there. And so I continued to outcast myself because I didn't want to get involved in that stuff, because I knew that would lower who I am. I know that I was brought up in a family that really prioritized, an optimistic mindset, and, we understand healing and we understand integration and we understand how that works. So I didn't want to get involved in that because it didn't feel good for me. And I'm so proud of myself that I didn't fall into that just so I could fit in. And even though I remained in this feeling of I don't fit in and I feel invisible and it was so fucking painful internally, at least I stayed true to who I am. And that I've always held really strongly because I genuinely think that's why I'm here. I moved across the other side of the world. I've done, I worked in London in the media. I've done all these things and I've really stretched myself because I never gave in to that stuff that I felt like lowered who I am. So I think that was a really big part. I think going back to your question, it's the spectrum of life, isn't it? It's we chose to incarnate into this human form to experience contrast. Otherwise, we would stay as energy. We would stay as waveform. We wouldn't even come into particle form. So the fact of going through those deep woundings of, lack of self-worth, not feeling enough and everything like that is so beautifully designed to give rise for certain desires. And it enables us to experience that contrast, the dark, the light, the black, the white, the right, the wrong. And I think we forget that sometimes.
I feel like I need to start beatboxing at the top of that.
Let's do it again. We'll turn it into a rap. With the right, with the right. I was actually saying to my housemates yesterday that I can't sing, but I can rap.
Yeah.
So this is my debut, guys. But yeah, and I think that's. I used to say this quote, which I actually retract now because I think it's actually quite detrimental. But there is truth in it that our power comes from our pain. And I used to say that, and then I realized that that's actually quite detrimental because our power doesn't have to come from our pain.
Yeah.
It can do. That's an avenue for us to access that. And often we do need to go to those rock bottom places of feeling like we're in lack, feeling like we're in scarcity, feeling like we don't have anything, so that we can, one, realize that that's just an illusion. And the truth of who we are is awareness, which means we're always supported, we're always guided, we're always looked after. And the thoughts of lack and scarcity are just illusory thoughts based off of our conditioning. But it also, it allows us to give rise to a desire for what we want to create. It really is, the feeling of not being good enough, I feel, is like a universal wounding that's been programmed into each and every one of us so that we can give rise to our creative genius, so that we can give rise to, okay, well, if I don't feel good enough, what can I create out of this experience? And it depends how you see it. If you see it from that human perspective of lack, or if you see it from the eternal perspective of creation and evolution. So it really depends on the intention behind it.
It's interesting you've just touched on that, because there is this dissonance between what the human animal kind of was before we commercialized ourselves, essentially, and what we are now. I feel like the constant strive for betterment and improvement and growth and congregation of things and money and toys and all that kind of stuff is something that's definitely been programmed into us. Because when we look back at tribalistic humans, I've done heaps of reading on this topic, it's something I find very interesting, is they didn't even have words in their vocabulary for sadness. Depression was never a thing. They didn't understand what it meant to not be content. Everything was abundant. They were always fulfilled. Life was good. They were in a constant state of happiness, even when, there was this one interview done with a tribesman out of the Amazon, and he essentially was telling this story of a jaguar came and took off one of his feet when he was on the way to the bathroom late at night. And he was so happy that happened, because he's like, I'm very glad that jaguar, had something to eat, even though it was his own foot, because they understood their place in the chain of nature. Whereas
that's one
now,
hell of a trip to the bathroom. Oh my God.
Literally.
Imagine that, coming back, going with 2 feet, coming back with one. But yeah. Wow.
But now, because we've elevated ourselves outside of the realms of nature, we feel like almost mini gods, which, I don't know, in another section of the conversation, maybe we kind of are.
Yeah.
But
it's all on the perspective you see it through.
Everything is.
Because when you said that, I'm like, well, technically, I believe that we are God. God is running through each and every one of us. But then also, from the tone of what you said, it's everyone is trying to be someone of influence and power and have that kind of God energy, like, you know, like when we see in like Greek, I can't talk, Greek, the caffeine's kicking in, Greek mythology, you know, that type of thing, like these demigods that kind of ruled, you know, societies and stuff. And I think this is what is really detrimental to our society today, is that we're looking at certain people with the fame and the success, and we don't understand the truth of what it means to be content and happy. Like I always say, and it's so fascinating that I've had this theory for so many years, and I keep coming across people recently that actually say that this is their experience, and I think it's such beautiful confirmation. And Coco from She Knows Business was one of them, is I feel like if you can't look at a flower and literally feel the immensity of the universe that we exist in and complete euphoria and bliss, you haven't quite grasped what it means to be human. Because something so simple, like if you look at a flower, like the intricacy, the beauty, the artistry in something so small, even the fact that it grows in its own evolution, right? It just needs a little bit of sun, a little bit of water and all of these natural elements, and it just grows. It just has its purpose. It's so beautiful. And some people have said to me that is actually a defining moment for them, going from chasing the hamster wheel of money or success or fame or whatever, and then suddenly like looking at a flower and being like, shit, that's fucking beautiful. And I've never stopped to actually look and admire something it's so micro in the universe, but it holds so much power. And that was a really big thing. Like when I was going through my spiritual awakening, I just spent so much time in nature, and that's when I was like looking at these plants and flowers being like, this is what it's fucking about. Like, and it sounds so silly to so many people, but we're so obsessed with our thoughts. We're literally so attached to our thoughts and living in the state of mind that we completely forget that in every moment of every single day, there is complete, unfiltered and unconditional bliss and euphoria that we have access to. And all we need to do is allow ourselves to go to that place. It's crazy.
It takes the pressure off our shoulders as well. Like I've told this story on the podcast before, so I won't go into it, but about halfway through this year, I did an LSD trip in like the rainforest up in Beachmont. And, you know, I'm experienced with psychedelics. I love them. But I do them with purpose. And me and my close mate, we just went up there. We didn't take, like, we just disconnected from social media, all that kind of stuff. Just took a whole bunch of fruit and just were monkeys all day, played by the creek. And, you know, in the peak of that kind of altered state, I was just sitting there. Stream was running either side of me, like meditating. I could see, you know, when you close your eyes and you look at the sun, you can see all like the crystals of the sun. I dissolved into one of those crystals, and I had this kind of epiphany that like, whether I'm here building my business or not, this ecosystem is thriving. And many ecosystems around the world continues to spin whether I get the sale or whether I don't. And that just took all the pressure off my chest from going, oh, I have to grow this much and this. That's what the books say. That's what everyone on social media, like, I need the Lambo, blah, blah, blah. It's like, oh, actually, no, I just need to come fucking sit in nature every now and again.
Oh, I feel like so gooey in my body. Like when you were saying that, I had so much strong vibration running through me, because that's the thing. That's the feeling state that we're chasing anyway, is that happiness and complete euphoria. And like, I think what you said, like with the pressure, is just hit the nail on the head. That's the generation we're living in, is a pressurized, it feels like a pressure cooker constantly.
Full of urgency and scarcity and marketing tactics out the wazoo.
Oh my God. Let's talk about marketing for a second. Marketing is really like, most marketing is lack consciousness. You see it in traditional advertising. You see it on social media. You see coaches doing it. This is what is kind of pissing me off at the moment, is a coach brought this up recently, and then I started to see it everywhere, is that in the coaching and mentoring space, your financial figure has become the stamp of success.
Yeah, I am this good at my job.
Yeah. I'm a 6 to 7 figure business coach, right? And you see it in everyone's bios and it's like, that's amazing. And there's nothing wrong with wanting to, you know, experience that level of success. But that is the leading marketing message that coaches and mentors are leading with. That to me is perpetuating a paradigm of scarcity. That to me is playing into lack consciousness. And it's like, yes, once you like sign up to these people, like, so the 6 to 7 figure business mentor or whatever is what gets people in. Once they're in, I do believe that a lot of coaches do the real work, the transformation. I get that and I do believe that. But regardless, you're still using that stamp as a way to get people in, which to me is still playing into a paradigm which I think is very outdated. And I think if you actually want to stand for, you know, transformation and personal development being something that people invest in, not just financially, not just for the financial return, but because this is the thing with coaching, and this is something I've noticed in my business, is a lot of people, it's still not normalized for a lot of people to invest money into self-growth and development. If you put a financial sticker on it of you can get 6 figures in 30 days or whatever ridiculous thing they do, you're like, oh, okay, I'm going to do that. But it's like, why don't we normalize investment in self-improvement? Why don't we normalize investment in personal growth and development and evolution? That's the narrative that I think needs to shift. And a lot of people are stepping out of the woodwork saying, oh, I used to market financially, and now I'm seeing that that's outdated. Like there's a new conversation that needs to be had. And that's kind of what I see us shifting into. And I think that's such a powerful paradigm shift because people need to see the beauty and the power in just simply investing in yourself without having that tangible gain, but actually knowing, okay, well, if I do the inner work and if I do the integration, the shadow work, I know that the money and whatever else is just going to be a natural consequence of who I am, who I'm being. So I'm going to invest in who I'm being and just trust that all of that other stuff will be made manifest through that experience.
It's a very interesting dance, that what you've just talked about there, because on one end of the spectrum, it's like, well, money is a universal measurement of value that we've built into our consciousness. You know, it's hardwired into us now, even from back when we were trading gold. But on the other end, like from the perspective of coach that say like, all right, I'm a 6 to 7 figure business coach, blah, blah, blah. I have the best intention to help these people that aren't necessarily conscious of their situation yet. If I don't market to them in the way that they understand, they're going to go to someone else that might not serve them as well as I can. So it's really just taking like, we need to change the cycle of things. Like there needs to be a few leading people that go, all right, well, money isn't the measuring stick here, but their value is already proven in the marketplace. So people no longer look to them needing that monetary measuring stick. On the other end of the spectrum, as the consumer, I feel like our move towards personal development is growing. It is growing rapidly. And I think the commercialization of information, like with social media and stuff, we can all get access to things that improve us. And even just from, you know, people like Gary Vee giving free information, it is slowly starting to reprogram us into thinking, oh, actually, education doesn't just come from a university degree. The same way that fulfillment doesn't just come from figures in the bank account. You know, we are making that spiritual awakening. And there is, I'm sure you'll have something to say about this. There is lots of spiritual people talking about us moving into the 4th dimension of consciousness. Can you give me a little bit of more context as how that is relevant to what I was just talking about? And maybe give your perspective on what that actually means for like the casual listener out there.
I was actually speaking to my housemate about this a few days ago, so that's interesting. My perspective is that when we speak about the different dimensions, what it is simply a different perspective. So I think some people glamorize it and think, oh, I'm transcending to the 4th and the 5th dimension.
Floating into space.
And it's like, no, you've just tapped into the frequency of that dimension, which gives you an alternate perspective. So this is like, for me, like when I went through my spiritual awakening, it's like the veil just lifted. Like there was certain illusions that I was living in my reality, and it just suddenly lifted, and I started to see the world so differently, but the world was exactly the same as before. It's just that I tapped into a higher frequency that gave me access to a different, more comprehensive understanding of what was going on. And I think that's one thing that people come to me for, is my ability to articulate that perspective from that frequency. But because I know a lot of people speak about this split in dimensional consciousness in the, in the year 2012, the world, and this is going quite deep, but the world split into third dimension consciousness and fifth dimension consciousness. Yeah. And a lot of people think we're living in like two different realities, but we're coexisting. So some people are walking around in fifth dimension, some people are walking around in third dimension. But it's, for me, I just see it, I love to just like simplify things. For me, it's just a change in perspective. So the more that you do the inner work and the shadow work and the integration, the more that you, are curious to understand and experience yourself as awareness, not just as a person, not just as an identity, not just as Jack or Emma, but who am I as an energetic being? When you start to tap into those experiences and do things like psychedelics are such a perfect example of tapping into different dimensions. Like I did a mushroom journey on Saturday, and like you, I use it with intention. And do you have to use psychedelics to access that? Absolutely not. And even, when I go into meditation and things like that, I'm in that state that I would have, through psychedelics. But the world that we live in and the way that we're conditioned, I feel like it's harder to access those states because of that, because of technology and things that kind of, clog up our pineal gland and things like that. So taking, or using medicine from Mother Earth to allow us to go to those states is just a beautiful reminder of accessing that part of ourselves. So that's like a way that you can kind of access the different dimensions. But yeah, that's how I would kind of describe it.
Yeah, that seems to make a lot more sense. And like on what you just touched about, like the pineal gland and things like that, I don't think we realize how much the world that we live in, like the built up society, actually affects our intuition and our ability to see what's going on around us. Because like I said before we started recording, I grew up out in the bush, literally. So there was no cell towers around me. Like our Wi-Fi barely worked. So
it's weird because it sounds like an inconvenience, but also it sounds really like delicious at the same time to be that disconnected. Yeah.
And so I went out camping back there like 3 weekends ago. And the amount of static noise that had just disappeared from my mind, just going back out there. And obviously it took a good 24 hours to decompress. Like I was sitting around the campfire the first night, like fidgeting, like, you want to go for a run? Like, let's go do something. I need to do something. Or like read a book or something. I couldn't just sit. Whereas after that 24 hours, I decompressed and I was like, fuck, this is what it feels like to be human. But it was the static noise that I really noticed. And whether that's from the EMFs, from all the cell towers, whether that's from maybe just the constant sound of motion in here, like the cars, the people, like I don't think we're evolved to live in this much technology. Like think of how long we were native humans for, and then you compare that to how long we've been living in advanced societies, how long the internet has been a thing, like the last 60-70 years maybe. Like we have not evolved in that period to be able to deal with this. And I think that's a big reason why, we're having these rampages of depression and anxiety, and that further perpetuated by media and people instilling beliefs and things like that. I think if we can understand and become aware that there are forces at play on our consciousness, and for us to not take so much necessary responsibility for how we're feeling and feel guilty for how we're feeling, then that's going to play a huge role into like how we deal with the evolution moving forward, because it's just going to get more fast paced. It's just going to get more connected. Everything is just advancing at such a rate that we don't even know. Like we're going to become part robot shortly. Like all that kind of stuff is already commercially available, like with Elon Musk Neuralink and all this kind of stuff. Like this is a 3-hour conversation.
Yeah.
Like
it's such an interesting thing to touch on. And I was actually thinking of Elon Musk when you were saying it, because I had a conversation with a friend the other day saying, one thing that I think the last few years hopefully has taught people, which is how I've always been taught to think because of the family that I come from, is not to just believe what you're being fed, right? Like if you look at the big players in this reality in our society, like the powers that be, the people that have the money, the influence over, the majority of the world's population, they're chess players.
Mm-hmm.
They're always doing things because they know where they want to be in the future. They know the outcome. So I was speaking to someone the other day about Elon, acquiring Twitter.
Twitter.
That's like the next one. That's
well, he does have like 11 kids, so I'm sure he's acquired a bit of that too.
He's got 11 kids. What? I swear he's not from this planet. But anyway, that's a different conversation. But like for him having Twitter, like there's definitely going to be a reason. Like that's part of the grand plan of something. But
especially
that's
because
just,
he overpaid like 4 times market value for it.
Yeah, that's just a tiny piece of the puzzle. Think about if you have like real estate in social media, like one of the big social media guns, if you have that real estate, you have a lot of influence and power over people because that's where we live these days. We live in social media. So I think people have to just develop such strong self-awareness to see that what's playing out on the big screen of things, like what's playing out on the movie that we're watching, is there's so much more behind that, and not to just believe, and we've seen this with everything in the last few years, and I don't want to say the words because obviously this is a podcast, but if you wait and have a little patience and self-awareness about things will come out of the woodwork eventually. But don't just believe what you're told by the media. Don't just believe what you see, because there is so much going on behind the scenes. There's always like an ulterior motive with a lot of these big players because they have so much influence over the population. And, I think that's like when you see life in that way of, it's a chess game and people are making certain moves because they know where they want to end up eventually, it gives you so much self-awareness to be able to not necessarily play into certain games and, that instant gratification and the convenience of like, okay, I'm going to do this now. And it's like, well, just hold on a minute, like have a little bit of a think. But I feel like I'm going off on a bit of a tangent, but kind of what you were saying with the rise of transhumanism, with the rise of, humans becoming hybrid robots, I see such a powerful opportunity to capitalize on us as consciousness. Because I remember when social media first came out, I actually was at uni and I did an assignment on Facebook. This was pre-Instagram, because I was like, there's something about this that doesn't feel right in my body. I feel like social media is going to take away from who we are at our core. So I did an assignment on it, and the assignment I wrote was from the bias of social media is a negative thing for our consciousness and for our self-image. Now I come to realize that the best way to work alongside technology is to work alongside it. It's to adapt with it, because it's not going to go backwards. It's only going to evolve. So the question really is, well, how can we evolve with this for the betterment of ourselves, our families, our communities, and for the collective? And so I see such a powerful opportunity to capitalize on what makes us human, which is emotional and energetic intelligence. And that's a big part of the consulting company that I run, because like, with the advancement of AI and automation, that's going to be taking away a lot of the routine-based tasks that we do as humans, which obviously is going to wipe out a lot of jobs. It's going to wipe out a lot of industries. And that is, scary. But also on the flip side, there's going to be a lot more new roles birthed from this. There's going to be a lot more new opportunities birthed from this. Just like when social media came into place, so many more job roles and, things have come from that. Even like influencers, that wouldn't exist if it wasn't for social media. And, being an influencer has given you freedom to work in your own time. It's given you the ability to be creative, like to connect with people. So there's so much positivity that can come out of it. And I think that's where we need to really put our time and focus into is, okay, well, how can we capitalize on that? Because I think technology is going to take away a lot of the stuff that actually takes us away from our power, which is amazing. Like, it's so beautiful, and it's such an incredible place that we're stepping into, and it's crazy and it's wild and it's chaotic, but I genuinely think it's going to be so amazing, because I think that the level of consciousness, if people utilize this as that opportunity, is going to massively rise as a collective.
Yeah, like it allows information to spread really fast. So it really depends on what side of the algorithm you're on. If you're being fed the misinformation, like you're part of the algorithm that receives that information and feeds upon it, then it is detrimental, because like we saw over the last 2 years, it's very easy to live in a constant state of fear when that is all you're seeing, because we do live in echo chambers when it comes to social, even just in the real world. With our friendship circles, we live in these echo chambers that confirm our bias about what's going on and how we feel. So it really starts with that self-awareness, like you were just saying, what kind of person and life do I want to live? And then how can I craft my social media experience? How can I craft my friendship circle? How can I craft my content absorption around things that are going to push me in the direction of becoming that version of consciousness? I'm curious to see your thoughts on how we are going to be able to live in a world of virtual reality. Because right now, like, our brain understands the laws of physics in the 3 dimensions. Like, we know that when I drop something from here, it's going to fall to the ground, right? We have basic understandings of the laws of physics. But when we take our current consciousness, our primal brain, into a world where it is not governed by any universal laws of physics, there is no limit to what could and can't be. How is our quite primal brain going to how are we going to deal with that? I'm going to reset the cameras and we'll dive into it.
So, an amazing question. I think, again, it depends on the state of the consumer, because I think some people that are currently running away from their reality, you know, through substance use, through social media use, through, you know, gaming, through things like this, some people that are trying to run and avoid reality. I'm not saying that all of those things mean that you're running away from reality, but it's your relationship to it. Yeah. Just disclaimer. If you're a gamer, it doesn't mean you're running away. It's just your relationship to it. Like, some people that have that, I think when VR really becomes more normalized and popular, I can't talk today, hey. You know what I mean? Yeah. When that happens, I think some people are going to get lost in it. Some people are going to really lose themselves, and not in a positive way. But then I also see the flip side, that some people are going to really get to know themselves through that experience. Like, a friend of mine has created a metaverse, and it's really focused on spiritual awakening and self-development. So you're in this reality. So you can actually check it out on Instagram. It's called Experience Online. So, like, just the letter Experience Online. So you're actually, like, I did a podcast interview with him actually as well. So just plugging that in there, because he describes it way better than me. But you basically go into this reality, and I think it's presence points that you get. So there's certain tasks and stuff that you do in the metaverse, but you actually gain points that you can then use to, like, buy coffee and stuff in the physical world. So you actually get rewarded for certain things you do to evolve your consciousness that you can then use to enhance your experience in the physical world. So there's certain companies, I believe, that are really utilizing this for the betterment and the spiritual awakening of humanity, which is really amazing. So I think the thing is, as well, is, you know, this reality that and again, this is quite deep, but this reality that we're currently living in and of itself is an illusory reality. And when that veil lifts and you start to see that we're actually all just players in a game, like, it starts to hold less weight, because you're like, well, we're already playing a game. So let's add a layer of VR onto that. Like, our phones are already an extension.
Who's to say this isn't VR right now?
Exactly. And, you know, like, if you look at, you know, certain theories, it says that we're in a simulation and everything like that. So, like, when you add the layer of VR onto it, it's just like an inception. It's like, you know, virtual inception. It's just another virtual reality, and then there'll be another virtual reality and another virtual reality. And so it's more like, how can we see this as a game and really use that? And again, it all comes down to self-awareness. Just continue to develop your self-awareness so you don't get lost in it. But how can you use it as a game to enhance your experience as a human and your experience as an eternal being in this physical reality? I don't think we know exactly how it's going to shape yet. And I think it's mind-blowing to think, like, I was watching a documentary yesterday on Pepsi. I don't know if you've seen it on Netflix. It was this fiasco that happened in the 90s about this guy that wanted to get this jet from this Pepsi game that they were doing. And then there was this lawsuit and everything else. And I was just watching it like, wow, like, the 90s was so, we didn't have phones, you know, the internet, when you look at the computers that they were using, I was like, oh my God, that was only 30 years ago. Are you kidding me? So I think it's scary and exhilarating simultaneously, because we actually are entering a period of such unknown, but it's also like, how can we integrate Web3 into our businesses for, you know, because the thing about, like, Web3 and, you know, blockchain and things like that is it's giving us sovereignty. It's decentralized. And so that is really fucking exciting. And so it's this real kind of blend of like, it could go one way and it could go the other way. It really depends on each and every one of us continuing to develop self-leadership, self-responsibility, self-awareness, so that the way that we navigate this shift and transition is for enhancement and not, it's not going to be detrimental to us. So I think that just really comes down to us each being the own influencer of our lives and not letting technology influence us, but we actually get to, influence it or use it.
Yeah, and that's been like, I think, the theme of this conversation. It's like there is positives and negatives in everything that is disruptive. That's what makes it disruptive. And it's really up to you as the individual to decide how you're going to utilize this new tool. The same way that I spoke about the printing press earlier on. Like, that was a tool that completely destroyed the power struggle or the positioning of power, but for the people that utilized it, that made such a beautiful kind of era of development and innovation and things like that. It democratized information the same way that social media has done that, and the same way that the blockchain is going to do that with money. Because like we've touched on, money is a unit of measure. We all kind of have this rational understanding of what it means. And then now we're stepping into an era of digital currencies and, digital point systems where money is no longer even a currency. It can be infinite amount of things, an exchange of value, which is what it once was. We're now stepping back into the era of like, I'll trade you 10 sheep for 4 buffalo. It's just now in a digital world. On that note, what you're just talking about as well, I was cleaning out my garage because I'm in the process of moving at the moment. And I found one of my MacBooks from 2015 and it was so clunky. You could almost like bench press this thing. And I had this just like epiphany. I was like, wow, in 7 years, my MacBook has gone from this clunky, thick thing with a okay display to now it's so streamlined you barely forget you forget it's in your bag. And yet they're 10 times more powerful. And we're going to see the exact same thing in virtual reality. Like, I was listening to a podcast a couple of weeks ago. He is a blockchain engineer. And he was touching a lot on like the simulation theory and all that kind of stuff. And he said it's quite plausible because within the next 30 to 40 years, technology of virtual reality is going to be so good, we'll be at the point of reality being indistinguishable from virtual reality. So who's to say that the console or the game before us hasn't already done that? Like, fuck.
I know. Do you know what? It's really hard to comprehend. And I always say this to people, that the simplest things are the most profound. Like, the way that this universe operates is actually extremely simple conceptually, and it's extremely profound, but it feels complex because our human mind can't really comprehend the immensity of this universe. So it's like, even if you look at things like the law of gravity, like how often do we talk about how fucking amazing the law of gravity is? Like, it's insane, but it's so simple.
We take it for granted.
Yeah, it's so simple. Like, we can't really quite get our heads around it. And also people don't look at it because it's so simple. I think we're so driven to look at like I'm actually going off on a tangent again, but we're going there. Like, it's interesting how people really like, they complicate life. Because it's kind of like we have this belief, like if something isn't complicated, if something isn't complex, it's not worth doing. It's not worth experiencing. And it's so crazy because on my spiritual evolution journey, it always comes back to simplicity. Like success in business, like relationships, just health. Everything is simplicity. Just be consistent, do the simple things, and that's where you access power. It's like when we overcomplicate things. And I think that's the thing with technology, is sometimes we can really... it adds like a layer of complexity. That's the thing. And I feel like it's really weird because right now what I'm feeling in my body is the word like pressure keeps coming through. I don't know if the communities listening to this are going to be like, but I kind of feel like I want this conversation to maybe give a bit of sense of relief to the pressure that we feel, and just like a reminder of the truth of who we are and this experience, and to continue seeing life as a game, whether it's like adding technology into your life or not, and just keep coming back to that, because that's where we really do access that power, and that's where we connect with our purpose. I don't know where that came from, and it's not really, but it is what it is. Yeah,
I get that. And like going back to simplicity, like everything in our observable universe is a combination of about 20 to 22 different types of molecules. Everything on Earth is comprised of pretty much 4 or 5 different types of molecules. So how's that for simplicity? Everything is made up of the same 5 things. And yet we think that everything is so different and complex. Like, I'm made up of the exact same thing as this chair that's made up of so-called plastic or fake leather. What? And like, we get so caught up in the rigmarole of our egos and things like that. It's wicked. But I feel like we should move this to a close.
Before we completely overwhelm people.
Yes, literally. There's plenty of room for part 2 though, I think. So to wrap this up in a nice little bow and to deliver some value, because we've touched on so many topics here, and I feel like it's given our audience a really good scope of, just your curiosity as a human being. So if you were to go back and have a conversation with yourself, say at your most troubled time, whenever that is for you, and have a conversation based on the information you know now, what would that conversation be like, and what would that kind of time period be? Real quick, before we wrap up the show, I want you to think back to a point in today's episode where you had that aha moment, where you got absolute certainty. You're like, I know exactly what I need to do now moving forward. And then I want you to remember how you found out about this show. Was it on someone's story? Was it a conversation with a friend maybe? Then I want you to go ahead and pay it forward. Because the way that the law of reciprocity works is that by introducing someone to something of value, they will always equate you with that value. Now, you guys know I don't run ads to this show. Everything is grown 100% organically, word of mouth. Now, if you want to play a part in the growth of this show, bigger guests, better stories, more content, and you want to gift that aha moment to more people all across the world, go ahead and pay it forward. It costs you nothing, but it could be priceless to someone who needs it.
I'm just laughing because I feel like the first thing that comes to mind is just relax, and that definitely ties in with the theme of this podcast. Like when I was at my lowest of the lows and feeling broken, it's just simply because I was creating a problem in my mind that didn't even exist. And I think, a lot of us try and solve problems, but it's not about solving problems. It's dissolving the problem. It's realizing that there actually is no problem. We're just making it a problem. And so how can we look at, I would say to my younger self, like, look at the areas of your life that you think are a problem and actually see it for what it really is, and dissolve the fact that there's a problem in the first place. And that's how a solution is a natural consequence of you just relaxing into that. And that kind of ties into the fact that we're so obsessed with believing our thoughts, and our thoughts aren't the truth of this experience. They're not the truth of this reality. Our thoughts are just, born from the ego as a way to protect us and as a way to understand things. But when you transcend beyond that level of thought, beyond the level of mind, that's when you access the truth of who you are, which is awareness. And as awareness, there are no problems, because problems exist at the level of mind. So I would definitely go back and just say to myself, like, just relax. Like, there are no problems. You're just perceiving it as a problem, which is causing the emotion, and just bring it back to the simplicity of who you truly are. Bring it back to awareness and just be the witness of those thoughts and allow them to come up and out of your body so you can actually, really step into your power.
Beautiful. If you want more of Emma, all her links will be down below. Her podcast, social media, all that kind of good stuff. Thank you so much for joining us. This has been absolutely wicked.
Yeah, it's been interesting. No, thank you. I really enjoyed it.
Awesome. All right. Thank you guys for tuning in. Like always, go and find that subscribe button if you haven't, because we're going to be delivering more juicy stuff like this every single week to your eardrums. So thank you guys. Much love, and go enjoy your day. I kind of stumbled on my words a little bit there. So it's been a long episode. Yeah, you're rubbing off
You're
on
welcome.
me. All right, guys. Love you. Catch you later. Woo!